perioperative care. Dr. Sampson,
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank
How
you.
are you?
Yes. It's a pleasure to
Now,
be here.
you chose a name. You chose a name that is very difficult to pronounce. Perioperative. What does that mean?
Peri just means around, and operative,
Okay.
around the process of surgery. So we didn't want it to be a name that just said that it's about surgery or just about anesthesia, because we're about nursing, we're about the infrastructure, the whole process around having quality of care around perioperative care. So that includes care, medicine, which is key to treatment of COVID patients, for example. So even though COVID patients don't necessarily need surgery, they need critical care medicine, and that's part of perioperative care.
Oh, wow. So you do everything. I mean, that's pretty creative, because then in the operating room, you have the surgeons, you have the nurses, you have the anesthesiology, you have, so what you do has everything to do with the operating room.
With surgical process, the surgical process,
With the
and
surgical
some
process.
things are, yeah, and some things are outlays of that. In fact, the specialty of critical care medicine, which is where you're using intensive, really started at one of the hospitals, not at Johns Hopkins, but one of the other hospitals in Baltimore. Was where they really started some of the first intensive care units. And they were started by anesthesiologists who were managing patients in recovery. These patients were so sick that they required continued mechanical ventilation, they required support of their blood pressure, they required all of the different things that you do in the intensive care unit. And that's how the first intensive care units were sort of started.
Okay. Your previous organization that you founded was Doctors for, I think it was Medical Missions,
Yeah.
Doctors United for Medical Missions. And you did a lot of things in Africa.
Yeah.
Okay, this perioperative care, is it specific, is your operation specific to United States, or is that also global?
It is global, and it is mostly specific to Africa.
Okay.
Mostly related to Africa.
Good.
We actually incorporated the organization a year ago when we were actually requested by the Liberian government to actually help them to establish their first Asia residency program because of the lack of any anesthesiologists in Liberia. And so to do this, we felt was really related to the infrastructure around having quality care related to surgical process. And we knew that there were other similar requests to do different similar things in Ghana, Sierra Leone, Ethiopia, Nigeria. So what we did is we decided that this didn't fit the mode of a medical mission. This was more encompassing of the system. This was more about improving the system of healthcare in Africa every day of the week, not just when a group of people go over, do a medical mission, and then they treat them, and then they leave, and then they come home. That we're looking at the whole system, and so we created a new board, got a new nonprofit status, and then inculcated Institute of Global Perioperative Care. And so one of our first partners in Africa has actually been the Diaspora Africa Forum, headed by one of our other partners in Africa is Pro Health International, which is a very large Nigerian-founded medical mission organization in Nigeria. And then, of course, because many of us are at Hopkins, not all of us, that's why it's not a Hopkins, but not all of us are at Hopkins, but the group at Hopkins and the anesthesia and critical care department is another partner of ours.
Okay, you see that listening to you, it's something has come to light, and that is you know,
Hmm.
and I'm an example. When I left United States to come to Africa to come help, I first thought of aviation. And look at me now. I'm in television. So sometimes you leave let's say in your case,
Hmm.
United States, you were coming for medical
Hmm.
mission, and then you get here and you see there's a need, there's a different need, and you quickly have to align. Is that just about what happened here?
A little bit for me. Okay, so for me, I probably would say that I developed an interest in Pan African philosophies when I was in undergraduate college at Jackson State University in Mississippi. That's where I went to undergrad. And so during my time in medical school in San Francisco, a lot of that time was about trying to figure out how do I access this vision and make it happen. So I went through all different type of ways to figure out how can I get to Africa, really better understanding of what's happening in healthcare in Africa. And it turned out that by the time I was I was able to arrange a fantastic experience where I went to Nigeria for 2 months. I literally worked with some of the leading healthcare providers in Nigeria during that time, including the chair of the Lagos University Teaching Hospital Department, uh, who was the head of their primary care course, a woman that worked with WHO pediatrician, who later became the first female Minister of Health in Nigeria, and also the head of the National Orthopedic Surgery Hospital in Nigeria. And, um, and so I was really fortunate to have such unbelievably, fantastically positive experience for 2 months in Nigeria in 1989. And so that's really
Wow.
where my work in Africa started.
So you had, first of all, how many other African countries have you done projects in?
Um, many African countries, more than a dozen African countries for
Okay.
projects. I went to, there was a period of about 10 years where I went to the country of Eritrea for a project at least once every year. We've done projects, we've done some work in Ethiopia. We've done several projects in Kenya. We actually did a project with the Pro Health International organization in Nigeria. And the project was so large that the Nigerian team had to actually charter their own plane just to carry all of their equipment and people from Nigeria, while the American group airlifted 2 tons of medical supplies to Nigeria. We've done many projects in Ghana, projects all
Uh-huh.
over Nigeria. Sierra Leone, we've been working in since 2010, and many projects in Liberia. We've also visited Mozambique and Malawi.
Okay, and you said this was 1989 when you first got to Nigeria?
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, was that the first country you came to?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That is my country we're
Well,
working with. Mm-hmm.
that begs the question. You look like a young man, and if you were already a doctor 31 years ago, geez, you've taken pretty good care of yourself. Wow. Okay. So let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about Nigeria. Back in
Mm-hmm.
1989, you came to Nigeria, and in your words, you had an
Mm-hmm.
outstanding experience. What does it say
Yes,
about all the
absolutely.
stuff they say about Nigeria and Nigerians in the media?
So, um, so when I went to Nigeria in 1989, it was in their government, of course. And it was a time when Fela Kuti was still alive. I actually had an opportunity to visit his club and to actually see him perform live. Um,
Oh wow.
and and there were many negative, impressions that people had they were throwing on me about Nigeria. But I had some very, very close friends who are Nigerians in San Francisco. It was the family, and their father was the former first chief of protocol for the country of Nigeria. And So it turns out that birds of a flock together. That statement is true. And so when you're working with honest and honorable people, then they tend to associate with honest and honorable people. And that was how I just got connected to a full network of fantastic people throughout the entire country. Literally
So
traveled
what do
from
you?
Lagos.
Uh-huh.
I went to Kano, Kaduna, actually took a bus all the way by myself to Benin City, and then all the way back to Lagos and through
And you
Abeokuta as
never got
well.
robbed, or you never got robbed or swindled or anything. I mean, so when you
Many,
say this,
many have tried, but few have succeeded.
there you go, there you go. Okay, I mean, I'm harping on this because Nigeria has had a bad rap in the media. And to hear
Mhm.
you say that you went there and had an outstanding, that's a story that needs to be told.
I would have to say that just like I love Ghana, I love Nigeria.
Mhm. Okay, well,
Mhm.
very good. Some of us don't recognize the borders anyway, so hey, we have no problems
Mhm.
with that. You mentioned
Mhm.
that during your undergrad years at Mississippi State, oh, Jackson State
Jackson
University
State.
in
Mhm.
Mississippi, right?
Mhm.
That's when
Yes.
you developed Pan-Africanism. Why was that?
Maybe,
What
maybe the
drove that?
seeds were developed before then, but that is where had an opportunity to get exposed to lots of different people and lots of different ideas, discuss in a communal way. The community I grew up in California was not a very diverse community, and this was during the 1960s, 1970s. I was constantly under a great deal of pressure as one of very few people of African, and so it was constant conflict and constant pressure. And instead of giving up, my reaction was to rebel. And so I rebelled against that. And so that rebellion happened within my mind. So I was arguing that there must be opportunities to connect with different people in Africa as well. And also, one of the people who was my mother's friend since before I was born, she was my mother's friend. She actually studied African arts and culture and history, and actually had an African gift shop there in California. And so being exposed to her and all that culture also definitely helped.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You're originally from California, is that correct?
Yes, my parents are from
And that's
Mississippi,
what,
um, and then they moved to California before I was born,
yeah, because I
and
was
so I
going to
lived.
ask, you must be the only one who leaves, you must be the only one that I know who leaves a state like California to come to university in Mississippi. Who does that? Right?
So there were a few other people that were at Jackson State that were from California, as I was. I would also say that
Okay.
my brother graduated from Jackson State, and my son
Mhm.
graduated from Jackson State. And when people saw me into medical school, there were a number of other people who actually left California and went to Jackson State. So Jackson State was
Okay, so what is
important
the
because
draw? What is the
for me,
draw?
Jackson
As
State.
long as I've been in the States, I haven't seen that migration direction.
So for me, Jackson State was important because of my family history. Both of my parents are
Okay.
from Mississippi, and
Okay.
my mother was the was is a Jackson State graduate. She was the first professional social worker in the state of Mississippi, having gotten a master's degree there, started Head Start there. My grandfather, that was my grandmother, and my grandfather was a mathematics professor, then became the dean at Jackson State. And then before he died, I should say after he passed away, they actually named the library after him. So I have a lot of
Okay.
family heritage and history with that particular university, and I wanted to more about it. I wanted to learn more about my own family history and also connect with grandmother and other relatives. And it's in addition to that, I honestly was tired of being the one of only people in almost everything that I did. You know, it was that black kid in the debate club and that black kid on the track team and that black kid here. I wanted to go somewhere, honestly, where it would just be me,
Okay.
not just a
Okay.
token or something. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the
So
multiple
you
reasons.
left a very liberal state and came to school in a very, very red state where Mississippi, we know there's a lot of racism. Was that change of scenery,
Mm-hmm.
did it have any impact on why your Pan-African, your inclination to Pan-Africanism was birthed? Did it have anything to do with it?
You have to realize that Mississippi is a very red because because even though it has the highest black population in the entire United States of any state, it is the black population is still only about 40%. And so it is the 60% that makes it a red state. So if I'm in a historically black college and university, I'm with the 40%. This is actually very
Okay.
relevant because there's a lot of actual outreach to historical black colleges and universities to Ghana right now. And last year there was a major HBCU conference in Ghana.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So you come to university and then your Pan-Africanism starts. Is that what drove you to bring a lot of what you've learned to Africa to help the needy?
That's where it all starts. That's where it all starts. That's where you exposure to not necessarily buying into everything I hear, but getting exposed to the All Africa Revolution Party, to Stokely Carmichael when he visited, Desmond visited our university because it was during the time of apartheid and the struggle to divest of their stock holdings from South Africa. So all of those types of things were things that I was seeking out exposure to whenever they would come and visit the university. Jesse Jackson would come there and give speeches talking about I am somebody, and so there was a lot of different things that I could absorb like a sponge when I was there. Maybe if I didn't have an interest in those things, I wouldn't have absorbed them, but I did have an interest, and that was one of the things that made it a fantastic experience to me. I would not have become a physician. I would not have even thought that I could become a physician had I not gone to Jackson State and had the mentorship and the experiences that I had at Jackson State University.
Okay, so when you now decided that you're going to do things in Africa, what were your expectations initially?
Initially, it was very complicated getting that first experience in Africa, and when it happened, everything folded together as if there were things that were meant to be. As I went and I spent time in England for 2 days while I was on my way to Nigeria. As I met in England, his mother was the chief of anesthesia at Lagos University Teaching Hospital. He gave me a letter to her. I met somebody else. They gave me a letter to another important person. So I was just going there to mostly, and it just so happened that every bit of way people were helping to connect me to the right people to have a good experience when I was there.
Okay, so you come in and you meet some professional, wonderful, in your words, wonderful people. But clearly, the systems back in the States and the systems in Africa are very different. What are some of the areas where, let's just say, you met some system-related frustrations or system-related pleasant surprises?
Um, so, so as a medical student, though I was in my last 2 months of medical school, so literally when I came back from my experience in Africa, done. All I had to do was march. Um, but as a medical student, because you learn most of your actual practice of medicine in the United States, especially during residency. So I hadn't done residency yet. I hadn't done my internship. And so I was coming there with a determined mind of who I was as a Black American, but but an open mind in terms of trying to absorb and understand what was going on there from a medical standpoint, correct, what was going there from a medical standpoint, incorrect, what things need to be developed, etc. And so I really was reliant on those mentors that were there with me in Nigeria.
Okay, so you came as a Pan-Africanist, so you had a little bit of positive outlook towards Africa before you first set foot here. What do you say to other brothers and sisters who kind of like the hoopla about Africa and everything, but they're not exactly Pan-African? And so when they come here, um, is there a lack of congruence in terms of how they see things and how the reality of Africa is?
So every day as I go through my day and I interface with different friends and people around me, I recognize that everyone is in a um, different point in the spectrum of understanding, who they are as relationship to being an African American. Some people are 20 years behind than where I am. And so what I try to do is to try to expose them to resources, whether it's reading, whether it's a YouTube, a video, or influencer, or whether, different positive things to open up their minds. And so, and then as their mind gets open, some of them decide, hey, next project, can I come with you? I want to come with you. So one of our last projects we did was in 2018, was one of our last big projects, and we had about 24 people come with us to Freetown, Sierra Leone, and all of them were divided into different projects, and all of them had different experience. Most of them, about half of them were students, and about half of them were faculty. And so we've had a number of big projects. We've taken one of the big projects we had was the year before that, where we were at a continent anesthesia congress that was being held in Abuja, Nigeria. And so literally there were people from all over the continent of Africa there at that conference for a week. And we brought a very large team to do education training programs throughout our week. And yes, the people who we trained, they learned a lot, but the people who came to train also learned a lot.
Very good. Africans, continental Africans and African Americans, what do you think it would take for us to really get on the same page with regards to how to develop Africa? Because the reason I ask is there has been a lot of calls lately that the African diaspora needs to play a huge role in Africa's development. And within the African diaspora, you have the continental Africans who live outside Africa, and then you have brothers and sisters who just born and raised, lived all their life in the diaspora. What would it take for us to work more seamlessly together, based on your knowledge, the African American community in America, and the Africans that you've related with on the continent?
I think that at least for me, I think that we have to basically just take it one step at a time. Identify the projects that we're working on, and then once you identify a project, then you can connect to the different people that are open to working with Africa within that project. And then as you're doing that, I think it's important to have an orientation process to help everybody get on the same page, so that people have a similar, or at least moving to towards understanding of their relationship and role in terms of not participating but partnering with brothers and sisters who live on the continent of Africa. And I know that right now there is a big effort among individuals in multiple historically Black colleges and universities, including the HBCU here in Baltimore, which is Morgan State University, to actually figure out ways that they can connect and partner with people in Africa. At Morgan State University, they've actually started this upcoming year, they will be having a PhD program based in Accra, Ghana. And
Wow.
these movements there's a lot of positive things that are actually happening right now. Not everybody can buy into it. Not everybody wants to buy into it. There are some African Americans in that they're never going to accept it, and then there are some who also accept it, who actually don't want to, for whatever reason. They would prefer to work with people of. But to be honest, there are some people who would rather work with people from a white church that meets their religious requirements, rather than to even consider working with African Americans who may actually be a similar religion. So some of those hangover from what Fela Kuti would call colonial mentality. But we can't. Everybody won't be on the same page, but there's enough people that will be on the same page that if we make effort to work together, then we can. Just like the person in Liberia who contacted me and asked me to work with them for the related to anesthesia, just like work that Dr. Erica Bennett is doing with the Diaspora Africa Forum, which is also another platform to connect of African descent from United States, Jamaica, and other places to the effort of collaborating with Africans to actually improve our homeland of Africa.
Okay, it's interesting you mentioned Dr. Bennett, Ambassador Bennett of the Diaspora Africa Forum. Now, with her organization here, I know from this side of the Atlantic, there is a meeting point, at least when these HBCUs come. But from the other side of the Atlantic, do you get the sense that the HBCUs, they are doing programs independently, or is there a national collaborative effort to tie it all together?
There is a national effort in that is being let me see. There's a Pan-African group that's been working with the African Union, and they have been working with the to try and get involved with healthcare projects. So they represent basically HBUs, very specifically, that are interested in that. And I'm actually just looking up their name right here real quick.
So they are the ones trying to tie all. How many HBCUs are there?
They're one of the groups. Yeah, they're one of the groups. So not every single there's many. So not every HBCU is involved with that group, but they have a number of them that are. Um, the the, uh,
Okay.
the challenge is that, for example, then I have a challenge with connecting with them in terms of their platform, because everything has to be HBCU or PBI, which means predominantly Black institution. But even though I'm a graduate and alumni of both Jackson State University and Howard University, where I did training, I'm not at one of those institutions now. So then it makes it challenging to figure out how to connect with that. But I still support their effort because I understand what they're trying to
Okay.
do. Um, it's called the
Where's the
they had
NAACP in
actually
all
had
this?
the HBCU PBU summit at the United Nations headquarters last September. And that's part of it. They've been connecting with the UNDP Regional Bureau of Africa.
Okay. Where's the NAACP in all this?
So the NAACP, and we also have a national Black physician organization called the NMA, National Medical Association. Both of those organizations are extremely conservative in terms of change, and so neither of those organizations have. I would say they're both evolving, but they're both at early level of evolving. So most of the leadership in those organizations maybe aren't really that connected to having the vision that somebody like Malcolm X would have had in terms of seeing the potential and power of connecting African Americans with the continent. If they did, for example, when you had all of those Africans getting their rights violated in China just within the last few weeks, you would have the NAACP, for example, speaking forcefully against that, because there are some actually African Americans there also who would be caught up with that, but perceive that as not being an African American issue. They're not really engaged with that. So that's a gradual process, and the only way to inculcate change who are Pan-Africanists to not disengage with those groups, but to continue to engage with the groups and help.
Right. I guess they are named national. They're sticking with the name national. Maybe when they become a GWACP, meaning Global Association of African Colored People, maybe they would look at stuff that are happening outside the borders of the United States, right?
Yes, they're actually the NAACP is the National Association of Colored People. So the term colored people basically is a historical term. So they have a very historical name. But once you remember that there are only two Black founders of the NAACP, and one of them passed in Ghana, finishing his life's work in Ghana. And one of the most key founder of the NAACP was none other than W.E.B. Du Bois. He's also the founder of their national newsletter called The Crisis. So they do have a Africanist connection to their core history, but he actually left that group because he was actually too radical for them even at that time. So after really helping to found the group, and with he and a woman named Ida B. Wells being the only Black people who are in the original board, because it's a multiracial organization by history, he left and eventually spent his final years in Accra, Ghana, at his home that is now the W.E.B. Du Bois Museum in Accra.
Okay. I'll come to that in just a minute. But before I do, when Trump rose into the political scene, you got the impression that a lot of African Americans were like, you know what, I can't deal with this. I'm out of here. And the mindset change at that time with regards to connecting back to Africa?
Hmm. No, I don't think so. You just finished. We just finished the year of the return, and
You're
we know
right.
that around 8,000 Americans actually visited Ghana alone from year of the return. And
Okay.
there are social media influencers like a young man named Wodemaya. He's Ghanaian, and then African
Mm-hmm.
American who's actually returned to Nigeria, and his name is
Mm-hmm.
the Prince Dynasty Amir. And these people are spending a lot of time with Africans. If you go to what a YouTube page, you'll find that he's interviewing Africans and British uh, Africans who all over the continent, not just in Ghana, Nigeria, Gambia, Sierra Leone, Liberia, who have returned and actually immigrated back to Africa. And nothing. Trump's presence did not change African Americans at all. It had no impact in changing African Americans.
Okay. So then, you mentioned that W.E.B. Du Bois, he was radical, came to Ghana. Muhammad Ali
Mm.
have been here. A lot of the big guns have been here. What is so special about Ghana with regards to African Americans?
So W.E.B. Du Bois was a close friend of Kwame Nkrumah, and he actually came to
Mm-hmm.
Ghana as a guest of Kwame Nkrumah. And so Kwame Nkrumah is also, along with W.E. Du Bois, they're historical, powerful founders of Pan-Africanist philosophy. And so, and of course, you know that he wrote about the potential establishment of, let's say, even a United States of Africa, and influenced many of the other African leaders who adopted the same color scheme as the Ghanaian flag for their flags. And so that powerful influence actually affected Ghanaians ultimately, although they may not have been ready for that message right at that time, as evidenced by his ousting, but it still impacted the historical development of different schools of thought within Ghana, as well as impacted the development of different thought within the United States as well. Both of those individuals, and so that's really a big part of it.
Okay. Lately, after the year of return, a lot of countries like Sierra Leone, I know about Sierra Leone, I know about Gabon, they've extended an invitation to African Americans or Africans all over the world. Um, but theirs is through the genealogy system. In other words, if you do your DNA test and it connects you back to that country, then they will extend an invitation for you. Basically, you qualify for citizenship. How do you see that playing within the African American community? Are people doing those tests more, or do they just develop a natural affinity to a specific country in Africa?
Some of those more, but I think it's more or less maybe those countries don't want to, the politicians don't want to be seen that they're just, copying exactly how Ghana's doing it. And they don't have that strong philosophical foundation has been developed in Ghana over the last, almost 100 years, right? And
Okay.
so I think that those are some of the differences. But when you talk about Sierra Leone, most people don't know that people of Sierra Leone's lineage connects to African Americans in terms of
Mm-hmm.
African Americans leaving the United States at the time of the American Revolutionary War. People against America, the Americans who were keeping them in bondage, and actually ended up going to Nova Scotia, Canada, and then to Freetown, Sierra Leone, where their assimilation with other African peoples developed into the Creole people. Their history connects to Americans in general.
Okay, so that's Sierra Leone and Liberia, right? Those were the two countries that had
So
that connection.
Liberia's
That's
so Liberia's connection is after that. So Liberia's connection it happens just prior to the Civil War. So that's about 70 years later than the Sierra Leone connection. So Sierra Leone's connection is older than the Liberian connection, and Sierra Leone's connection is centered mainly specifically in Freetown, whereas Liberia's connection, because Liberia was area that the United States was in control of, they were actually separate colonies spread throughout the entire country of what is now Liberia, and those different colonies had to then connect together to actually form what is now Liberia. So the different states, like the Maryland state, actually had Maryland State Colony Society, and the county here called Maryland. So that is how these different in Liberia started separately, but worked together because they were all in American controlled area. So the history of them both connects to African Americans, but the connection, the specifics of that connection developed in very different ways that we can see results of now.
Have you done your DNA test?
My mom did it and told me the results recently, but to me, the key is not the DNA test to me. To me, as an African American, I think that the term African American is a Pan-Africanist representation anyways, because regardless of what the DNA test shows, the fact of the matter is that there can't be one specific place all of my DNA comes from in place. With every generation, it splits in two and splits in two and splits in two. I may have ancestors that were in Angola, which 30% of African American slaves came from Angola. I may have ancestors in Nigeria, which my DNA actually does show. There may be from Ghana, Sierra Leone. It can be many different locations. Well, what does that mean? That I should just focus on that one location? So I believe in that we as people need to all work together for a common cause.
Is shall I say, African leaders, I don't know whether you look at it from the specific country level or at the AU level, are they doing enough to attract or to encourage the African diaspora as a whole to come home? Maybe not physically come home, but to turn towards Africa to help develop.
Little by little, you see glimmers of light in Uganda, and there's some wealthy African Americans who are working with entrepreneurs in Uganda. There are African Americans working with people in Ethiopia, in many different of the countries. Ironically, because Liberia is still yet to get really stable. The country that we should have one of the most tight connections with, there's not as many African American entrepreneurs there because the country needs to stabilize. But out of all of those countries, there is a reason why the president of Ghana was voted by his African peers as the #1 president in Africa for 2019. The reason for that relates to the large revenue, basically that Ghana got from Year of the Return, from all of the visitors, for all of the collaborations, for all the businesses in Americans developing in Ghana, for all the homes that African Americans are buying and living in with Ghanaians to actually to improve the country. So there's a reason for that, and I think that the thing that you described with other countries developing similar initiatives is part of the other countries seeing that as an example. So I hope that they see that example, and I hope they see Rwanda as an example too, of a country that has changed itself from one extreme to the other to become a friendly business environment and to be known as the clean Singapore example of the entire country. So these positive examples that come out of different countries, whether they're Nigeria, Rwanda, Ethiopia, or Ghana, are ones that other hopefully will follow, and ones that will help to open the eyes of African Americans who need to see the excitement and opportunities of connecting with their brothers and sisters on the continent.
So when I hear you speak, I hear Uganda, I hear Ghana, I hear Nigeria. Most all these are English-speaking countries. Meanwhile, you have Senegal's Go Ireland, which is another door of no return during the slave trade and all. Why do you think those francophone countries are not mentioned as often as the English-speaking countries? Is the language the issue?
Well, remember, one of the countries I mentioned was Rwanda. And Rwanda was a French-speaking country, and they decided, the president changed them to English-speaking. The question begs why. And part of that why relates to the Central African franc, West African Central franc, and the Central African franc, and the connection that those countries have had with France, and the benefit that France has gained from that connection, monetarily, in terms of business, in terms of basically continuing some of the things that they were continuing on since colonization. So as the continued awakening of those countries progresses, then I think the opportunities to connect will also continue. But of course, Americans also speak a lot, and so that also creates another challenge. But it's not insurmountable. One of the countries I worked with was also Burkina Faso, and so I committed myself to crash study French in order to at least have some degree of functionality within that country at that time.
Okay, I interviewed the young man in South Africa who's originally from Zimbabwe. He had something interesting to say. He thought Mugabe was the great leader. He thought Nelson Mandela made a mistake when he worked in an open arm with the white folks in South Africa. He thought Paul Kagame is not really a good leader, and he thought Nana Akufo-Addo is a great leader, but is hypocritical for allowing United States to have a military base in Ghana, even though he didn't do it. It was done before he got to power. And I asked him, wait, these are the African superstars, and you have a problem with all of them. What do you think as a Pan-Africanist?
So basically, I try not to get caught up into all of those specific, controversies, recognizing at this point in time, because of YouTube and the internet, there's, believe it or not, more people who believe that the world is flat today than at any other time in history. More people believe the world is flat.
Really?
And so, yes, believe it or not, wow. Today, there's more people on this planet that believe the world is. If you type flat in YouTube, you will be overwhelmed. More videos, possibly watch. If you watch videos for the next month, you will watch all of the videos. And so people are always, there's always people who want to be a contrarian or anything like that. So I try to I think and all populations have people that want to be a contrarian. To me, what you're describing is a contrarian point.
Okay.
I mean, no person is perfect, but my God,
Okay.
I mean, what Nelson Mandela sacrificed, what Nelson Mandela and what Nelson Mandela transformed himself into, to say that you have a problem with Nelson Mandela, so when you get some other leaders, they become somewhat, you can have different opinions. I think Mugabe, when he was gaining independence from changing Rhodesia into Zimbabwe, that's not the same Mugabe who was controlled by his wife at the end of his life. That's not the same Mugabe who drove their economy having $1 trillion bill that was worthless. I mean, so and that's not the same Mugabe who probably his in the latter times of his life, his personal resources are possibly more valuable than the entire resources of the entire country of Zimbabwe. I mean, that's not a good leader. I mean, so he may have been a different leader at one point in time than he is at another point in time. So to just say that he's this or he's, again, it's more complicated than that. So when you bring things down to such simple terms, then things can get confusing. No person is
Oh,
perfect, but we do have people who've made huge, giant impacts, and we need to recognize and honor those impacts.
okay. Now I'm shifting to another person I interviewed, also originally from Zimbabwe, but now a Ghanaian citizen. Her name is Ambassador Dr. Arikana Chiobori Kwao. You familiar with her?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I'm
Now,
familiar with
she
her.
started,
I mhm.
go ahead. You were saying?
So, yeah, I'm familiar with her. I give her great honor, great respect. She's a great woman. She's a powerful speaker, and she's a great Africa. The things are fantastic. Also a graduate of HBCU. I believe she graduated from Meharry Medical School, Tennessee, and so she's gone through a lot, um, and uh, and she and she does be honored.
Well, before I ask a question, I'm just tying some pieces together. It looks like the
Mhm.
HBCUs are doing a great job at developing Pan-Africanists. Would you say that?
Mhm. Um,
Okay,
yes,
go ahead.
Pan-Africanists are developing within them, and probably there's so many of them, so there's probably different things happening. But I'm not sure that the HBC. I think that produces the environment where which you can develop. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So
Hmm.
so back
Hmm.
to Ambassador Arikane Chiomborikwa. She started talking about the injustices that France is meting out to her former colonies in Africa. And
Hmm.
mysteriously, the AU Commission chair, Faki Mahamat, fired her. Okay. And you would think that the African leaders would say, wait a minute, don't fire her. But all of these guys are standing there not saying anything. In fact, she told me that she picked up the position as the AU ambassador to United States. She picked it up as a Ghanaian citizen. All right. And so she gets fired. The whole world felt like this she was fired unjustly. All the leaders are mute. They haven't said a word. Meanwhile, what she was saying, everybody believed was the truth. What happened there?
So so as a new Ghanaian, because I became
Mhm.
citizen in November, and as someone who would rather speak positively about people than speak negatively about people, and what
Mm.
and someone who doesn't like to speak about things that I'm not necessarily an expert. I would I don't know the answer to your question. Um, I think that probably is a issue for those particular African leaders. Um, I have recently heard one of her presentations where she expressed a lack of animosity and also a reluctance to necessarily the African leaders for what happened, because as I recall, she said this within the last week that it was specifically one person who had the power to do this. So maybe you're referring to the fact that maybe they haven't protested or done what needs to be done to change that, and um, so I don't know all of the complexities within their situations and why they didn't, do more for preventing that from happening. But I know
We
that
Africa.
France has a lot of power, and and people still have to reconcile with with those powerful forces and interests and issues. And so I can't really answer that in detail.
Well, I mean, I don't know what happened. I can't answer in detail, but when certain things you can basically put two and two together. Look, this woman was saying something that every African knew needed to be said. Many
Mm-hmm.
of the leaders, the country specific leaders, the presidents,
Mm-hmm.
believed that those things needed to be said. And so, if she
Right.
was bold enough to be saying it and giving them cover because for whatever reason they themselves cannot say it, if this guy comes along and fires her, you would think that the guys will come around and say, dude, don't do that, and call her back. And so, for me, you have to try and they've left us. And this is where I become, I guess I'm monologuing, call it whatever it is. But it seemed to me that the leaders might have thought that way. She's rising too fast. Maybe we need to put her at her place. I know you can't say that, but for me, I think that's what happened.
Mm-hmm. It could be.
Because it doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'd like to thank you for giving us your time. You've been great. And let me tell you, we've spoken prior to this, and the history with which you come to Africa to do the things you do, and the fact that you obviously are so well read about African history and and the nuances around them. I want to tell you personally that I think you're a gift to Africa, and I want you to continue doing what you do for the continent.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.